Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 42. The Manor Master. Part 1. A man in navy blue martial arts robes, carrying a writing case on his back, paced back and forth not far from the young Mocksword Manor's clan residence, clutching a talisman in his hand. Flutter, flutter. Before long, a large flapping shadow appeared, centered around where he stood. Gradually, as if descending, the shadow diminished in size. "Gojo. Have you found him?" the man asked. In response, the shrunken eagle shadow shook its head. Perplexed, the man's expression shifted to one of incomprehension. He then pointed his sword finger mudra towards a specific spot in the void. Closing his eyes, he immersed himself in deep concentration. After a while, he opened his eyes, furrowing his brow. "What's this?" Having received what Gojo had witnessed, the man struggled to make sense of the situation. The entire clan residence seemed shrouded in a hazy mist. Such a phenomenon does not occur easily. It can be considered a type of ghostly domain, manifested by the powerful intent of a high-level vengeful spirit. This is no ordinary matter. In terms of magical techniques, a ghostly domain is akin to a barrier. Only vengeful spirits of at least the green spirit level and above are capable of forming such a domain. This was the reason for the man's grave concern. How do I deal with this? He had intended to observe the target from the outside, but that had become difficult. Even diviner Sak, whose mastery of magical arts nearly rivaled his own, had fallen victim to it, making it impossible to recklessly approach using spells. However, the ghostly spirit pavilion had incurred the madam's wrath, rendering the prospect of entering equally daunting. As he pondered, his gaze fell upon a tipsy youth, arm in arm with women who appeared to be courtesans, stumbling along the path. The youth swayed and collapsed to the ground, vomiting, as the courtesans attempted to rouse him. "Oh my! Young Master Mock? Young Master Mock? You should go home and rest. Didn't you promise to show us around?" The courtesans, referred to as young Master Mock, shook him several times to wake him. When he failed to regain consciousness, they furtively glanced around. Seeing that young Master Mock remained unresponsive, they discreetly began rummaging through his pockets. Observing this, the corners of the man's mouth curled up slightly. ******. The basic writings of the school of Yin and Yang state that the lowest rank of vengeful spirits, the red spirits, are a type of earthbound spirits that can cause the living to experience goosebumps or mild chills. Go-chan had become a vengeful spirit due to his unwavering desire to live, his sense of injustice, and the death energy infused by Mok Jyangun. Moreover, he was a red spirit, the lowest rank. As a newly formed vengeful spirit, he knew nothing and had no clear understanding of possession or how to carry it out. Thanks to Chong Ryan's advice, he managed to gradually take control of Ha Chai Rin's body. As he suppressed her consciousness, fragments of memories seeped in. A blood-stained room. A heart filled with resentment. "Grandfather? You can't be dead, right? Grandfather, you're one of the 4 great assassins of the Central Plains, the flying killing Yama's guest. Get up. You can't die. Get up. The position of sect leader is vacant, and you want me to complete the 100 days and nights? What kind of nonsense is that? Just do it. Do it. Grandfather. I will definitely inherit your position and avenge you. No matter who it is." Through absorbing Ha Chai Rin's memories, Go-chan learned that the sect leader had been suddenly murdered, plunging the flying killing sect into internal chaos. Ha Chai Rin had been undergoing the 100 days and nights ritual to become the next sect leader of the flying killing sect. Was that so? It was a truly astonishing revelation. The deceased sect leader, who had earned the title of one of the 4 great assassins, was a supreme master who had reached the pinnacle of the transformation realm and boasted an almost perfect success rate in assassinations, befitting his status at the pinnacle of the assassin world. Yet, such an exceptional assassin had been unexpectedly killed. Based on Ha Chiren's memories, even his granddaughter suspected that it might have been the work of one of the other 4 great assassins. If that were the case, it would pose significant challenges for the flying killing sect's pursuit of revenge. Of course, that was their problem. Go-chan desperately wanted to resolve this issue. Sir? Yes? Please remove me from this body. Shudder. Even as he spoke, goosebumps rose on his skin, and his arms tingled. It was because of his own voice. Anyone can imagine being the opposite sex, but when it actually happens, it becomes overwhelming for Go-chan. If I remove you, I'll have to deal with that woman immediately. She was an assassin who had targeted Mok Jaehyun's life. He couldn't let her live. That woman is the granddaughter of the flying killing sect's Manor master, right? Didn't you say she's the next sect leader? Well, yes, but... I came here because of the now-dead guard Gam, but if his granddaughter dies, things will get even more troublesome, don't you think? That's... true. Go-chan's voice trailed off. He couldn't deny Mok Jaehyun's words. Although the disciples of the flying killing sect found her temperament challenging, their loyalty and respect for the deceased flying killing Yama's guest were exceptionally high. Therefore, if his granddaughter Ha Chiren were to die, the entire flying killing sect would resort to every means possible to kill Mok Jaehyun. In fact, he secretly hoped for it. I wish he would die. However, if Mok Jaehyun died, Go-chan would also perish. That was the fate of a spirit with a connected bond, as Chong Ryong had explained. Damn it. It was a cruel twist of fate. He was essentially no different from a slave. He couldn't allow Mok Jaehyun to die, even if he wanted to. Go-chan found himself in a conflicted state of mind. Sigh. Chong Ryong, who had been smoking a long pipe and exhaling smoke, clicked her tongue and spoke to the troubled Go-chan. Why do you look like you're about to die? Newbie. You should be grateful just for possessing a living body. Is this something to be grateful for? If that's the case, couldn't she have put him in a male body? However, fearing Chong Ryong, he uttered words that contradicted his true feelings. Well, that's true, but... You were a weakling when you were alive, weren't you? To be merely second-rate at that age, even after retiring as an assassin, means there was almost no hope for you. It was like a fatal blow, one might say. Every word Chong Ryong spoke was like a sharp dagger, tormenting Go-chan. It rendered him speechless in a different sense. Pack. At that moment, Go-chan instinctively tilted his head back slightly. Yo, young master? Right in front of his nose, he saw the sole of Mok Jaehyun's shoe. If he had been a moment later, he would have been kicked in the chin. Mok Jaehyun then said to him, "You're definitely fast. Even faster than when you were alive." What? Go-chan frowned at those words. Upon reflection, he realized that this movement was not his own. He had followed the lead of the body. The body of Ha Chiren, who had reached the pinnacle of the transcendent realm, possessed a level of intuition that was incomparably more acute than Go-chan, who had merely been second-rate. Ah. Seeing his realization, Chong Ryong chuckled and spoke. Why are you so surprised? It's only natural since you've possessed a strong body. Is that so? Still, it's best if you adapt to it. Newbie, given your low level, it will take more time for you to fully utilize that body. Even among vengeful spirits, there exist different ranks. Chong Ryong, who had ascended to the realm of the 2 demons and 2 spirits, could draw out power surpassing the original body when possessing someone. However, Go-chan, who was merely at the lowest red spirit level, was incapable of such feats. Nonetheless, possessing the body of a supreme master at the pinnacle of the transcendent realm meant he had become incomparably stronger than his original self. Transcendent realm. Go-chan felt a strange sensation. When he had been alive and cultivating martial arts, his goal had been to reach the first-rate level. However, despite his ardent desire, his talent was lacking, and he ultimately failed to cross that threshold. Now, he found himself in possession of a body that had reached the pinnacle of the transcendent realm. Realizing this, his feelings took a distinct turn. You seem to be pleased now, I see. At Chang Ryang's remark, Go Chan regained his senses and waved his hands in denial. Although he was captivated by the prospect of being at the transcendent realm, the fact that it was a woman's body and not a man's continued to torment him. Being a newbie, your thinking is still mundane. Chang Ryang clicked her tongue. Once one accepts the reality of their own death and the concept of being a spirit, the physical body becomes nothing more than a shell. Of course, there is a difference between a shell one likes and one that one doesn't, but still. She found it incomprehensible that he would show such aversion simply because it was a woman's body. Tisk tsk. You should be satisfied that you've obtained a young and beautiful body. I am a man. Even if being young is good, a woman's body is simply. If you dare to indulge in self-gratification while secretly admiring yourself in the mirror when no one's looking, I will kill you. No. Why would I do such a thing? He had no such inclinations. If he had to possess a body, he would have preferred a male one. Mok Jiangnan then said to him, for now, please adapt to that body. When an opportunity arises later, I will arrange for you to transfer to another one. He wanted to demand an immediate change, but recognizing the situation, Go Chan could say no more. He could only nod his head in dejection. It seemed he had no choice but to live as Ha Chai Ren for the time being. But would this fellow really allow him to switch bodies so easily? He felt a strange unease. At that moment, thump thump thump. The sound of someone running down the corridor could be heard. Then, someone knocked on the door. Knock knock. Who is it? Young master. It's Bakyan from the inner hall. Come in. At Mok Jiang'un's words, the door opened, and a man dressed in the attire of the inner hall entered. The man named Bakyan slightly bowed his head in a simple greeting, then spoke in a voice filled with delight. Young master. Rejoice. What? Why was he suddenly being told to rejoice? As he wondered, the inner hall guard Bakyan said, the Manor master has awakened. Those words brought a glint to the eyes of both Mok Jiang'un and Go Chan, who was possessing Ha Chai-ren's body. At the time, the Manor master had not been possessed but was on the verge of death due to the demonic master's kill. Although Mok Jiang'un had left the body, the Manor master had been significantly weakened, yet somehow, he seemed to have survived. This was an unexpected development. Mok Jiang'un had been contemplating leaving this place once he had become somewhat familiar with the basic techniques before the Manor master succumbed to his injuries. Staying longer would only lead to unpleasant entanglements with the madam or the second young master. But now, the Manor master had awakened. Does that mean he had fully recovered? Young master? At the call of the inner hall guard Bakyan, Mok Jiang'un changed his expression and placed his hand on his chest, speaking in a tone of relief. Ah, what a relief! To hear that father has awakened. Seeing his act, Go Chan inwardly clicked his tongue. Of course, the inner hall guard Bakyan, unaware of Mok Jiang'un's true nature, harbored no suspicions. It's a blessing for the young Mok Sword Manor clan. Indeed. Thank you for coming to inform me. Ah. That's not the only reason. What? The Manor master is looking for you, young master. For me? Yes. He said to bring you immediately. Mok Jiang'un slightly tilted his head at those words. The Manor master had summoned him as soon as he woke up? Why? Could it be because of that hidden place beneath the medicinal hall? Ah. At Chang Ryang's words, Mok Jiang'un inwardly acknowledged the possibility. Perhaps the Manor master had already checked the place where the secret manuals were hidden after waking up. If that were the case, Mok Jiang'un would naturally be the object of suspicion. What will you do? In response to that question, Mok Jiang'un lightly shrugged his shoulders. Currently, the inner hall guard had personally come to escort him, so he had no choice but to go. Judging solely from the delighted reaction of the inner hall guard, it was still uncertain whether the Manor master had summoned him for the reason Chang Ryong had speculated. I understand. I will head to the main hall shortly. No. He said to bring you immediately. Immediately? Maybe not? Hearing it put this way, it became difficult to ascertain once again. Regardless, it seemed the encounter with the Manor Master could not be delayed. Understood. Then, let us go. At Mok Jaeongun's words, Go Chan, who was possessing Ha Chiren's body, habitually prepared to follow. However, Mok Jaeongun shook his head and said, Guard go. Chiren, don't you have some cleaning to do in the storage room? Go Chiren, he said. The names were mixed up. Feeling somewhat cringed, Go Chan frowned. Suddenly, he recalled what had happened in the storage room. It was the place where he had lost his life. Had they not disposed of his corpse yet? I'll be back soon. In the meantime, please take care of the cleaning. Understood. As Go Chan responded, Mok Jaeongun left the room, following the inner hall guard Bakyin. Chang Ryong naturally accompanied Mok Jaeongun. After their departure, Go Chan felt a sense of unease. He now found himself in a situation where he had to handle the disposal of his own corpse. Damn it. Go Chan shook his head in disbelief. Nevertheless, he soon rose from his seat to head to the storage room. For a moment, Go Chan blushed as he looked down at his chest. The unfamiliar weight and sensation he had never experienced as a man left him feeling strange. Goosebumps rose involuntarily. He gazed into the mirror but couldn't adapt. Ha Chiren's alluring face and fluttering clothes remained unchanged, and she was undeniably beautiful. Perhaps because she had grown so splendidly, it's more bothersome than I thought. His chest felt somewhat heavy. Go Chan furtively glanced around to ensure no one was nearby, then, driven by curiosity, unknowingly brought both hands gently to his chest. Swish! At that instant, Chang Ryong's face abruptly appeared, penetrating through the door screen. Go Chan instantly froze like ice. Tisk tsk. Seeing this, Chang Ryong clicked her tongue as if finding it pathetic, then promptly withdrew her face. Swish! He hastily opened the door and looked outside, but she had long vanished. Go Chan felt the urge to dig a grave and bury himself right then and there. A glint of interest flashed in Mok Jaeongun's eyes as he headed towards the main hall. It was because he wasn't the only one heading there. On a forked path, Mok Yucheon, whose complexion had turned somewhat dark red compared to 4 days ago, was walking under the guidance of another inner hall guard. Could it be unrelated to the medicinal hall incident? Should he consider it fortunate? As he pondered, Mok Yucheon, who had spotted Mok Jaeongun, approached with quick strides as if he had something to say. Chapter 43. The Manor Master. Part 2. Mok Yucheon approached with quick strides, as if he had something to say. However, upon reaching Mok Jaeongun, he seemed unable to speak his mind directly, perhaps due to the presence of the 2 inner hall guards who had come to escort them. In response, Mok Jaeongun smiled and spoke first. It's been 4 days. Don't make idle talk. You? Mok Yucheon stammered, unable to complete his sentence. What could be the reason for his behavior? As Mok Jaeongun wondered, Mok Yucheon gestured with his head, indicating that they should head to the main hall for now. Thus, they walked towards the main hall. When the inner hall guards took the lead, walking ahead with a sense of discretion, Mok Yucheon spoke in a quiet voice. You. Have you tried that thing? That thing? Keep your voice down. Mok Yucheon admonished softly. Mok Jaeongun chuckled and replied in a low voice. What are you talking about? Are you really asking because you don't know? Ah. Perhaps the ignited wood. Shoo. Mok Yucheon cut off Mok Jaeongun's words. Glancing at the inner hall guards walking ahead of them, Mok Yucheon whispered even more quietly. Don't mention it directly. Just answer my question. What Mok Yucheon was inquiring about was none other than the Manor Master's exclusive secret manual, the ignited wood heart transformation method. In fact, upon noticing that Mok Yuchion's complexion had turned significantly darker compared to 4 days ago, Mok Jaeyonan immediately understood what he was referring to. However, he feigned ignorance. "It's impressive that you haven't succumbed to delusion yet." "Who?" Chang Ryong, who was beside them, remarked while puffing on her pipe. She, too, was aware that Mok Yuchion had learned the wrong cultivation method. Since Mok Jaeyonan had not provided the complete method and had arbitrarily changed some characters in the oral formula, side effects were inevitable. "Is there a problem?" Although it was intentional, Mok Jaeyonan spoke as if he knew nothing. Mok Yuchion's brow furrowed fiercely. "You're saying that even after looking at my face?" His voice rose, but as he glanced ahead, Mok Yuchion cut off his words. He seemed to be suppressing his anger. After managing to compose himself, Mok Yuchion spoke quietly. "Did you try it or not? Just tell me that." In response to that question, Mok Jaeyonan answered nonchalantly. "If it were you, wouldn't you have tried it?" At those words, Mok Yuchion narrowed his eyes and stared intently at Mok Jaeyonan. "Right. There's no way you wouldn't have tried it." Even if he had claimed not to covet the position of Manor Master, it was a secret manual of the supreme martial arts. Any martial artist would have been curious. "But why are you unaffected?" For the past 4 days, Mok Yuchion had practiced the breathing technique of the ignited wood heart transformation method with overflowing enthusiasm. However, the more he practiced, the more he felt the internal energy within his body transforming and becoming strangely different. On the first day, he had dismissed it as a possible effect of the supreme martial arts cultivation method, but after 4 days, his skin had turned dark red, and something felt amiss. Did he deceive me? Due to the changes occurring in his body, his suspicions wouldn't easily subside. It was difficult to confront Mok Jaeyonan, as he had readily recited the oral formula 9 times upon request, making it ambiguous to accuse him of providing a fake one. If that fellow taught me the genuine method, then it means I'm the problem. That, in itself, was hard for him to accept. Even he, who had reached the pinnacle of the peak realm, was struggling to master the cultivation method, yet this fellow showed no signs of the same side effects as him. If that were the case, it would imply that he might have misunderstood or incorrectly practiced the oral formula of the cultivation method. Clench. Mok Yuchion's fist tightened. No, that couldn't be. How could this fellow, who was merely third-rate due to his lacking talent, surpass him, the one hailed as a genius, in his understanding of the supreme martial arts? He didn't know what the problem was, but he was determined to overcome it. At that moment, Mok Jaeyonan said to Mok Yuchion, "I'm not sure what the issue is, but now that the Manor Master has awakened, won't the situation change?" This time, the corners of Mok Yuchion's mouth curled up slightly. Indeed, the Manor Master's awakening was a stroke of fortune for him. He had begun learning the Manor Master's exclusive martial arts through a deal, but many of the clan's vassals still viewed him, the son of a concubine, with distrust. Thus, he had felt a great sense of unease. However, now that the Manor Master, who cherished him, had awakened, the succession structure had once again turned in his favor. The heavens are on my side. Perhaps the Manor Master summoning his children immediately after waking up was related to this matter as well. To clearly designate his successor. Seeing Mok Yuchion's expectant demeanor, Mok Jaeyonan chuckled and turned his gaze away, as if disinterested. Ho ho. At that moment, Chang Ryang looked somewhere with intrigue. Mok Jaeyonan glanced at her questioningly. She then spoke. It seems they have entered. Entered? They have quite the guts. To set foot inside my ghostly domain without fear, even after seeing it. Ah. At her words, Mok Jaeyonan nodded in understanding. It seemed that what he had been waiting for had arrived. Mok Jaeyonan had anticipated that diviner Sax associates would undoubtedly come before long. I shall greet them first. Swish. With those words, Chang Ryong, whose red eyes gleamed, vanished beyond the wall beside the path. ******. In front of the main hall. Another bloodline of the Mok family had already arrived. It was Mok Yong-ho, the eldest young master. Although he had circulated his internal energy to alleviate his hangover to some extent, he still reeked of alcohol, causing Lady Suk's expression to sour. His debauchery was nothing new, so despite her frustration, she had grown somewhat accustomed to it. However, today was different. Why now, of all times? She was already plagued with worries due to the variable named Mok Jae-un. But this variable could be resolved by either eliminating Mok Jae-un or seizing the Manor Master's exclusive secret manual from him, so she was contemplating alternative solutions. Yet, the Manor Master, whom she had assumed would surely breathe his last, had awakened. Rather than joy at her husband's awakening, she was gripped by unease. Could it be? Why had he summoned his children first thing after waking up? No matter how much she pondered, only one thought crossed her mind. Successor. Perhaps the Manor Master, having barely regained consciousness after a long coma, intended to designate his successor in preparation for any unforeseen circumstances. If her speculation were correct, it would be disastrous. It was a well-known fact that the Manor Master had favored the youngest, Mok Yu-cheon. If Yong-ho were to enter in such a state at this juncture, grit. Even though he was her own child, at times like this, he was truly a nuisance. Just 2 years ago, he had been sensible enough to be called clever, if not a genius, but at some point, he had become immersed in wine and women. All of this was because of that Mok Yu-cheon. However, now was not the time to loathe or resent him. Yong-ho. Yes, mother. Refrain from making unnecessary remarks in front of the Manor Master. This mother will handle everything, so you just stay quiet. Opening his mouth while reeking of alcohol would do no good. Although this meeting was only for the children, she believed they wouldn't prevent her, as the wife, from entering. If the Manor Master intended to confirm the succession immediately, she had to find a way to stop it. As she pondered, she noticed Lady Jang and the second son of the Mok family, Mok Un-pyong, approaching from the entrance of the left pavilion. Humph. They were also detestable. Lady Jang, who hailed from the Huinan family, acted subserviently in front of her, addressing her as sister-in-law, but behind her back, she resorted to all sorts of schemes to elevate her own son to the position of Manor Master, such as winning over the clan's vassals. Despicable creature. That Mok Un-pyong was no different. Like mother, like son, he was a thief coveting the position of the eldest son, Mok Yong-ho. Although she wasn't certain what the Manor Master would say today, their desires would not come to fruition. She would make sure of it. As she ruminated, the last of the Mok family's young masters arrived at the entrance of the southern pavilion. It was the third son, Mok Jae-un, and the youngest, Mok Yu-cheon. Seeing this, the inner Manor Master, Jang Myong-in, ascended the wooden floor and announced through the door screen. All the young masters have gathered. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The 4 half-brothers of the Mok family stood side by side. From left to right, there was the eldest young master Mok Yong-ho, the second son Mok Un-pyong, the third son Mok Jae-un, and the youngest Mok Yu-cheon. Only these 4 had entered the Manor Master's room. Lady Suk, the first wife, and Lady Jang, the second wife, had insisted on entering as well, but they were unable to do so due to the Manor Master's adamance. They were waiting outside, fidgeting anxiously. Mok Jae-un was inwardly perplexed. The reason was the reactions of the Mok family brothers. He had expected them to show joy and warmth, welcoming the Manor Master who had narrowly escaped death's doorstep, as he was their father. However, surprisingly, they appeared utterly tense. Even Mok Yu-cheon, who was said to be so cherished, was no exception. As a result, the atmosphere was quite heavy. So that's why. Now he understood. He realized why they had been so concerned about the Manor Master's life and death while he was bedridden. It turned out they were gauging the Manor Master's mood. How strict must he be for them to display such nervousness? Mok Jae-un surreptitiously glanced at the face of the Manor Master, who was half sitting on the bed. Despite being unconscious for a long time due to the killing, curse, his eyes were so sharp that they felt alive. Wasn't it said that he's the strongest in the Yun Mok sword matter? That was indeed written in the information note left by the real Mok Jiangun. Manor Master Mok Indan. He was said to be the strongest swordsman in the Yun Mok sword matter and one of the top 10 swordsmen in the entire Anhui province. Out of curiosity, he had asked the deceased guard Gam about this. What level does being in the top 10 of a province equate to? Do you think it's an easy feat to become one of the top 10 swordsmen in an entire province, you fool? The guard Gam had said that Manor Master Mok Indan was a martial artist who had reached the pinnacle of the transcendent realm. At the time, he hadn't fully grasped the magnificence of that level. However, after experiencing the strength of the youngest Mok Yuchion, who had reached the early stage of the peak realm, he could now somewhat fathom how powerful a master of that caliber would be. But that also raised a question. How did he fall victim to the killing curse? A supreme master at the pinnacle of the transcendent realm is said to manipulate energy as naturally as breathing. It was incomprehensible how someone so formidable had succumbed to the kill, a type of curse. As he was studying magical techniques, it puzzled him even more. At that moment, Mok Jiangun's eyes met those of Manor Master Mok Indan. Unlike the other brothers, Mok Jiangun did not avert his gaze. He saw no reason to do so, no matter how strict the father-son relationship was. This behavior caught the attention of Manor Master Mok Indan. The reason was simple. This child, who had never properly made eye contact with him since his mother's passing, did not avoid his gaze. However, his bewilderment ended there. Mok Indan spoke. Do you know why I summoned you all? Everyone remained silent in response to this question. Of course, they all had one thing in mind. Successor. However, they couldn't openly voice it. They had to avoid appearing presumptuous here. But someone broke the silence and spoke up. Could it be that you summoned us all immediately after waking from your long illness to discuss the matter of your successor? Everyone looked at the speaker with slightly startled eyes. It was Mok Jiangun. You? He's being straightforward? After glancing at Mok Jiangun, they cautiously gauged Manor Master Mok Indan's reaction. They wanted to check if his mood had turned unpleasant. Surprisingly, Manor Master Mok Indan showed no sign of discomfort. Rather, yes. It is to designate my successor. He readily admitted it. At this, everyone's expressions grew tense. Until he had awakened from his sickbed, the Manor Master had never personally mentioned the matter of his successor. Yet, he was bringing it up for the first time. Is he going to decide right here and now? Could it be that he gathered us all to pass the successor position to that Mok Yuchion? Is father giving me a chance? Each of them became lost in thought. Of course, Mok Jiangun had no attachment to the Manor Master's position, so he planned to simply go along with the atmosphere. Perhaps because of this, he appeared the most relaxed among them. However, this demeanor came as a surprise to the Manor Master. Does he have no expectations? Or has he changed? The reaction, which was quite different from the other children, piqued his interest. Coincidentally, the Manor Master had already heard about recent events from the inner Manor Master. That child, Mok Jiangun, saved me? Yes. Initially, even this subordinate found it hard to believe, but the third young master prevented the Feng assassin who was possessed by an evil spirit and tried to harm the Lord. It was quite unexpected. He would have believed it if it had been the youngest, Mok Yuchion. But of all people, it was this child, whom he had considered the most timid and lacking in talent, with no prospects, who had saved him. But that is merely the third young master's opinion, and the exact truth. That's enough. That much is sufficient. Pardon? Summon all the children. You mean the young masters? That's right. The Manor Master had gathered all the young masters less than half a shurchen after waking up. For the first time, he thought that the time given to him might not be long. Lying on his sickbed for an extended period, he had expended a significant amount of his true energy, and this incident had nearly caused him to close his eyes forever. If that had happened, the young Mocksword Manor would have been plunged into chaos and war among his children. If that had happened, the young Mocksword Manor would have been plunged into chaos and war among his children. Even without experiencing it, that future was clear to him. Thus, he made a decision. I will determine who is qualified to be my successor through a test. As he spoke those words, the Manor Master subtly glanced at Mok Jiangyun. I shall grant even you a modicum of opportunity. Chapter 43.5 The Manor Master Part 3 From the hill below, the lights of the manor were visible. Two figures stood in the darkness, gazing at the scene with indifferent eyes. The taller of the two asked the other, "Is this the place?" "Yes." Upon hearing the response, the tall figure retrieved something the size of a finger from within his robes. It appeared to be a seal of some sort. "I heard the owner of this was released from the duty of killing." "What was the reason?" The figure beside him, forming a hand seal with one hand, replied with a smirk, "The demonic eagle." "What's that?" "The demonic puppet of Mt. Noko." "Demonic puppet?" "I've heard stories of a diviner in the nearby pavilion who uses the monstrous demonic eagle as his divine beast. It seems that person is here." The tall figure's eyes flashed with interest at those words. "I see. So there was a diviner's intervention. Now that we have the answer, what should we do?" "We must bring it." With those words, the tall figure raised his hand. At that moment, countless sounds of movement could be heard from behind. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I will determine who is qualified to be the clan's successor through a test. The atmosphere in the room shifted drastically at the Manor Master's declaration. The youngest, Mok Yucheon, couldn't hide his joy, his lips twitching at the Manor Master's words. After all, if it was a test, he would be at an advantage over anyone else. Ah. Father is giving me a chance. What would a test in a martial clan entail? Naturally, it would showcase one's martial arts prowess. The eldest son, Mok Yongo, was at the second-rate level, the second son, Mokun Pyong, was first-rate, and the third son beside him, Mok Jiangyun, was merely third-rate. No one could defeat him. Whether it was a martial arts competition or anything else, he had the upper hand. Nash. The second son, Mokun Pyong, bit his lower lip tightly. He, too, had thoughts similar to Mok Yucheon. No matter who heard it, the Manor Master's declaration was undoubtedly in favor of the youngest, Mok Yucheon, who possessed the most outstanding martial arts skills. If it was based on martial arts, who could defeat that monstrous kid who had reached the initial stage of the peak realm at the mere age of 16? How could you do this? It would have been better to appoint Mok Yucheon directly if it was going to be like this. Mokun Pyong, who found all of this unfair, mustered up the courage to open his mouth, something he wouldn't have dared to do under normal circumstances. "I have something to say to you, Father." "What is it?" "If it's a test, what exactly will we be doing?" At that question, Manor Master Mok Indan stared intently at his second son, Mokun Pyong. Under his father's imposing gaze, Mokun Pyong, who had barely gathered the courage to speak up, lowered his head slightly, averting his eyes. Mok Indan let out a small snort. To muster up an opinion only to be unable to even meet his father's gaze. It was pathetic beyond compare. However, having narrowly escaped death, he had decided to give everyone a fair chance in the process of selecting the Manor Master. Thus, he spoke, "If it were a simple matter of testing martial arts through a competition, none of you would be able to defeat the youngest." At those words, Mokun Pyong's expression instantly soured. His pride had been wounded. However, in front of his father, he quickly managed his expression. Manor Master Mok Indan continued speaking without paying any heed. "Therefore, I will distinguish who possesses the qualifications to be the Manor Master." Qualifications? The expressions of the Mok family's brothers turned puzzled at those words. Even Mok Yucheon, who had thought that everything would be decided through martial arts since it was a matter of selecting the successor of a martial clan, felt uneasy when qualifications were mentioned. If those qualifications weren't based on martial arts, it would be the most disadvantageous for him. Ah. Perhaps that was why Makun Pyong's expression, in turn, brightened. Just a moment ago, he had thought the Manor Master's intention was set on the youngest, Mak Yucheon, but if qualifications were being discussed, it would be difficult for Mak Yucheon, the son of a concubine, to gain the recognition of the retainers. Then it will be a fight between this guy and me. Makun Pyong glanced at his eldest brother, Mak Yongo, beside him. It was impossible to know what he was thinking. The madam was trying to make him the successor by any means, but the person himself was so far off the mark that he only brought disappointment to the Manor Master. There's a chance now. Makun Pyong had been unable to hide his disappointment upon hearing the news of the Manor Master's awakening. However, he was filled with a glimmer of hope. If he played his cards right, he might be able to gain his father's recognition and officially become the Manor Master. At that moment, Mak Yucheon cautiously opened his mouth. "Father, may I ask what it means to assess qualifications?" The position of Manor Master is that of the leader who guides this single group called the Yun Mok Sword Manor. I will test if someone is suitable for that role. A person suitable to be the Manor Master? It was even more difficult to guess what kind of test it would be. Glancing over his sons, Manor Master Mok Indan continued, "Regardless of having different mothers, you are all my children. Therefore, in choosing a successor, everyone will be given a fair chance. So for now, return and contemplate what kind of test there might be and prepare accordingly." Having said what he needed to, he ordered his sons to leave. As they were about to withdraw, bowing their heads with their hands clasped together, "I apologize, but I will not take the test." Everyone's attention turned to the one who had spoken. It was none other than Mak Jaeyoung. What is he talking about? He won't take the test? Both Makun Pyong and Mak Yucheon looked at him with uncomprehending eyes. Was he voluntarily giving up the official opportunity to become the successor? As they were puzzled, Manor Master Mak Indan questioned, "You won't take the test?" "That's correct." "Why won't you take it?" "I am lacking in many aspects compared to my elder brothers and even my younger brother. Thus, I believe I am not qualified to be the successor. Therefore, I will not take the test." Upon hearing this, Makun Pyong let out a small snort. Whatever his intentions were, if he was stepping down on his own, there was nothing bad about it. It meant the competition would become even more manageable. Was he really serious? Mak Yucheon found it unexpected. Unlike when the Manor Master's life and death were uncertain, refusing the official opportunity to become the successor meant that what he had told him was true. He hadn't expected him to truly not desire the position of Manor Master. What was he thinking? This is good. Mak Jaeyoung, on the other hand, was pleased with this situation. If he officially withdrew from the succession struggle, they would no longer bother him. His goal was martial arts anyway. Once he had established a solid foundation, he would lead the Yun Mok Sword Manor. There was no need to be tied down. However, why do you think you are lacking? The Manor Master's question continued. Mak Jaeyoung was puzzled by this kind of question. As far as he knew, the Manor Master had found the eldest son, Mak Yongo, and the deceased Mak Jaeyoung pathetic. Then there should be no regret in him dropping out of the succession test. He's being troublesome. It would have been over if he had just acknowledged it. But there was no benefit in offending the Manor Master here. So he had no choice but to provide an appropriate justification. It is said that a successor should prioritize the eldest son, and if not, it is right to appoint someone with outstanding abilities and high merit. Moreover, my maternal family is not what it used to be and cannot be of help to the Yun Mok Sword Manor, so I am even more unqualified to be the successor. He smoothly explained the reasons why he wasn't suitable. Makun Pyong nodded his head at this. He knows his place. He was satisfied. To this extent, he naturally thought the Manor Master would no longer insist on Mak Jaeyoung taking the succession test. Huh? But something seemed strange. The Manor Master's expression toward Mak Jaeyoung wasn't that bad. Rather, it was closer to a look of reconsidering him. What? And that guess was correct. What Mok Jaeyoung had said was self-deprecating, so it couldn't be called exceptional. However, for the Manor Master, Mok Jaeyoung's demeanor of clearly understanding himself and directly expressing his opinion was vastly different from before. That weakness and pathetic appearance were nowhere to be seen. What had happened during the years he had been bedridden with his eyes closed? He has changed. What had transformed this kid like this? Or had he been changing during the few years he hadn't paid attention to him? The Manor Master became curious about Mok Jaeyoung. Swish! Suddenly, the Manor Master swung the outer robe he was wearing to the back, revealing the Manor Master's upper body, which was covered in numerous scars. Among them, what caught everyone's attention was his severed arm, clearly visible despite being wrapped in bandages. Everyone knew that he had met with an accident caused by some mysterious assailant a few days ago. But they hadn't known that his arm had been cut off. Manor Master Mok Indan was a swordsman. For a right-handed swordsman to lose an arm was no different from losing his prime. However, as if he didn't care about it at all, he opened his mouth. "You said it yourself." "Pardon?" "That the eldest son or someone with outstanding abilities and merit should be chosen as the successor." "Yes. But I am neither of those. I heard you blocked and killed the person who cut off this father's arm." "What?" At those words, everyone turned to look at Mok Jaeyoung. They had heard that Mok Jaeyoung, who had visited the main hall, had been injured and stayed in the medical hall for a while, but they had no idea such a thing had happened. Of course, this fact had been embellished by Mok Jaeyoung. Mok Jaeyoung hadn't anticipated that the story he had embellished and shared would lead to such a troublesome outcome. The Manor Master, pointing to his severed arm, said, "According to your words, someone who has made contributions is also fully qualified to be the successor. So it seems that reason alone is not enough to justify refusing the test." At the Manor Master's words, Mok Jaeyoung's face became expressionless. It was becoming quite bothersome for the Manor Master to try to pull him in like this when he had clearly stated he wouldn't take the test. So Mok Jaeyoung decided it would be better to just say he wouldn't participate in the test. But then something caught Mok Jaeyoung's eye. It was the scar visible on the Manor Master's side. The scar, which had healed but was still distinctly visible, seemed to have been caused by a sharp object like a sword. The moment Mok Jaeyoung saw it, his eyes narrowed. The scar. It was remarkably similar to the mark he had been searching for. Because of this, Mok Jaeyoung's mind was focused on only one thing: how the Manor Master had gotten that scar, rather than matters of succession or anything else. Flinch. At that moment, Mok Jaeyoung frowned and slightly turned his head. The Manor Master asked with a puzzled expression, "Why are you doing that?" "What?" Before he could even finish his sentence, Manor Master Mok Indan also turned sharp-eyed and abruptly rose from his seat. "Father?" The other brothers of the Mok family were bewildered. No sooner had that happened than sudden noises of commotion erupted from outside. "It's an enemy raid. The enemy has infiltrated," informed the Manor Master. A sudden emergency situation. Everyone couldn't hide their shock. Meanwhile, the youngest, Mok Yucheon, who had sensed the presences almost simultaneously with the sounds of commotion, looked at Mok Jaeyoung with surprised eyes. "What's with this guy?" He had noticed it even before his father and himself. Despite being merely a third-rate martial artist,